John, how can you always have the right TV for the right application without carrying hundreds of valves on your truck?
You can carry the hundreds of valves on a trailer behind your truck.
That's too funny. That would work, but how are you going to do that? Maybe there's an easier way.
You can use Sporland's interchangeable cartridge style Type Q and Type BQ TEVs. Type Q is a conventional design and Type BQ is a balanced port TEV.
Well, come on. I need easy. How easy is it?
Easy as 1, 2, 3.
And it serves thousands of unique applications. So what's the process? How do I put this together?
First, you select the thermostatic element assembly. Then you select the body that you need. Then you select the right size cartridge for the application to get the proper capacity TEV for your application. And then I guess it should also be said you want to actually assemble those into a single valve.
That'd probably be a good idea.
Indeed.
These easy to select and assemble valves mean you're always carrying the right valve for the right job then. If folks want to learn more, what do they do?
You can go to sporland.com and find more information on the Type Q and BQ thermostatic expansion valves.
I guess that's Jim and John for Sporland signing off.
We've all been there, in the middle of a job, everything going smoothly, until boom, you're missing a part. United Refrigeration is your one-stop shop for all your refrigeration needs. Use your computer or smartphone to go to www.uri.com at any time of the day or night to check stock on your favorite brands, such as Copeland, Sporland, Carlisle compressors, Danfoss, Emerson CPC boards and sensors, Carrol, Hussmann parts, and K2Therm. United Refrigeration Inc. is home to these brands and many more. Looking for information on refrigerant conversions or refrigerant banking? Quick access links on the homepage can get you to the information you need. All approved accounts are able to see live to-the-minute inventory and pricing. Product not in stock at your local branch? No problem. Use the Nearby Stock feature to find a local branch that does have what you need. Are you looking for a branch address, phone number, or after-hours number? That's all available as well. Just click on the branch locator and search for your local branch. Have a model number and looking for a replacement part? www.uri.com/ARP has a vast list of quick pick replacement parts. Just search for the model number of the equipment you're working on and click the Replacement Parts tab. If you don't have an account, click the Register button and we'll have you online in no time. With more than 400 locations in North America, each United Refrigeration branch is fully stocked for immediate pickup. Our branch employees have in-depth technical knowledge, so we can help you get what you need when you need it. Visit your local store or www.uri.com/ARP today. United Refrigeration Inc. has all your solutions down cold.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Advanced Refrigeration Podcast. You're your host, Brett Wetzel and Kevin Compass. What's going on, man?
Oh, just running some service calls and typical shaft at the end of the day.
What kind of shaft?
I showed up to a store that another contractor's doing an EMS retrofit at, and they switched over one of the frozen racks and had the inversion and Danfoss wrong for the defrost differential valve.
Oh, no.
In a store with no dehumidification.
Oh, no.
And in a vacuum. And half the air conditioning doesn't work. So every case on the rack was iced up.
Hot gas or cool gas? You say cool gas?
Hot gas.
Well, at least you can cook it, right?
Yeah, it was. I got about halfway through, got mad, ended up calling the project manager and told the other company that they needed to come back and deal with it.
And de-ice all the cases. So everything on the low temp rack is just screwed right now.
The fucking walk-in boxes, everything. Everything. All the fucking products like mush. I'm like, yeah, this is not my problem.
Well, this week I'm actually at home, as I told you last week where I was at. I was out in Arizona dealing with that thing, which we're going to probably talk about with you, me, and James, and just talk about how interesting that whole rigmarole is. I got to get, I want to get the manufacturer on. I don't know how your feelings are on that, Kev, but I think that would be a good one. But for tonight, Hey, we're going to talk with the guys from Dalkia Energy. We have Will Carrol and Tom Mathews. Tom, you want to start off by telling a little bit about yourself and how long you've been in the industry, and then we'll talk to Will, who's waiting in the wings here, and then we'll get going on what we're doing.
Hey, I'm kind of an industry veteran. I started out after college at a supermarket chain in Boston, Star Markets, moved on to Hannaford Brothers, eventually became the director of facilities and energy, and then crossed over to the other side, worked for Emerson for a number of years as their VP of operations for their group, their retail services group, and went all over the world on that, and then started my own consulting business in Shanghai, China, with a couple of refrigeration nerds from China and New Zealand, and spread to the U.S. And I've been doing that for a number of years and working regularly with Dalkia.
Cool. We also have Will Carrol. So Will's been on the show before, but why don't you give a little bit of feedback just in case the people listening don't know who you are?
So yeah, I'm Will Carrol. I'm at Dalkia Energy Solutions. I sell, design, and implement energy efficiency projects, do a lot of work in grocery stores. Sort of a relative newcomer to refrigeration, and have been, just felt grateful that guys like Brett and Kevin and Tom have welcomed me in and chatted with me and answered questions and humored me. I think our business revolves around sort of removing costs from facilities at scale. So trying to find kind of repeatable, reliable ways to save energy, save expense in the built environment, and spent a lot of time, probably the last 10 years in supermarkets, the last 5 years more intently focused on refrigeration. And I think, anyway, just excited to jump in the mix and chat about, we've sort of been chasing a number of different measures that have largely wrapped up over the last couple of years. And now I think refrigeration is sort of as hot a topic as ever. And I think, anyway, just excited to be on the show. I think what you guys have going is really great. And it's just a nice environment and nice kind of vibe. Everyone wants to share, everyone wants to learn, and just trying to get better, and happy to be a part of it.
Awesome. Well, so like I said, tonight we're talking with the guys from Dalkia Energy Group to basically, they're going to show us some of the methods and some proof in the pudding, like as far as when you do certain methods of energy management, and whether it be floating head or floating suction, whether it be adding a subcooler on the rack, trying to get some added capacity. And we're gonna delve into some of those things with real hard numbers. And man, I'm gonna be wanting that spreadsheet, because I'm gonna be pulling apart trying to figure out how much kilowatt an hour you're saving per every degree of saturated suction and saturated condensing temperature. So who wants to start off? Tom, you starting off with it, or Will?
So I just a quick forward. I think the premise when I originally reached out to you, Brett, is that you guys you're talking about a whole lot of stuff on the show. Oftentimes I hear you say, probably once an episode, if you do that, you're going to save a shitload. And I think what I'd like to get into is how much is a shitload? And as it turns out, you can actually define exactly how much it is. And so we're going to go right down the rabbit hole and put like exact numbers on a bunch of different scenarios. And it's so interesting. You walk into a rack room, things are going crazy. There's a million things going on, but you could actually, through modeling, really get down to very exact numbers on where the energy is being consumed and how possibly you can consume less of it. So I think, anyway, that was my hope for the premise for this episode, defining a shitload.
So that's what I should title the episode, Defining a Shitload with Dalkia Energy.
That works.
All right, Tom, I'm going to bring up the thing that you had up before, and you can delve right into it, boss.
Okay. Let's see. I need it to get bigger on my screen somehow. There we go. Is my cursor going to show on there?
Yeah, I think so. Should.
And no, I'm not reaching to what I've got here. Hang on just a second, please.
Yeah, no problem.
Full screen. You're on that one. Can you still see it? You see my cursor now?
Good to go.
All right, we're good. So I'm going to frame everything that we're going to look at here this tool is used, it's an annual refrigeration energy model that predicts the amount of energy the system's going to use based on how it's configured, what the architecture of the rack system is, and how it's actually operating, what the set points are, and what the achieved values are. And it allows you to look at a lot of different scenarios. And the primary use we apply it to is recommissioning. Because when you go out in a field to recommission, and I've been part of about 4,000 supermarket recommissionings, and I can tell you honestly, maybe 2,000 were an initial success. The other 2,000, none of the remedial work ever got done that would allow the measures that were identified in the initial inspection and testing to be taken care of, be implemented. So they really didn't save much at all, just a little here and there. The others saved quite a lot, but quite a lot of time was spent on measures that really weren't going to get much. And what measures get a lot, get a shitload, as Will would say, are depend on where you are in the country and how the rack is constructed. So this tool allows you to look at that. So what we started with here, it says redacted model. The only thing that's been redacted is the name of the store, the customer, so we don't accidentally irritate anybody. And so if I go down to this part of the model, things will start looking familiar to anybody who's in the business. So this is rack A. It had a -28 and -18 suction group. They weren't running at -28, -18, of course. And then they had two medium temp racks, R507, a little unusual for our business. This is return gas superheat. These are other values that were measured. The BTUs come from the refrigeration legend, adjustments to those. So you end up with the average suction temperature, design load, actual load, if you're applying a diversity factor, which the utilities make us do. And then we get into it, subcooled or not.
Hold on real quick. I'm going through all the numbers here, and what I don't see is if you differentiate between total heat rejection and just the capacity of the compressor. Does that come into play anywhere where we just haven't gotten there yet, or what?
Over here where the model calculations actually are.
Okay. All right. Sorry.
It actually calculates the heat of rejection.
Okay.
Based on the actual conditions, not to predict it. And we always, so it's looking at evaporator load, no matter how much installed compressor load there is. Sometimes racks go in or eventually come to be loaded at 105%, 115% on really bad ones. But most of them cruise along at somewhere between 75 and 85% of design load at design conditions. The rest of the time, they're more lightly loaded than that. So the model calculates for whatever the outside temperature is. We'll go over here. Here's the outside ambient temperature. It looks at what the liquid temperature coming from the condenser is going to be based on whatever set points you enter over here for saturated condensing temperature minimum or TD minimum, what depends, pressure minimum, whatever your control strategy is. And then it calculates based on those saturated condensing temperatures and pressures, what the compressor power would be, what the condenser fan power would be. And it does this for every temperature likely to be run into -25 to whatever it's going to be. My cursor, for some reason, there we go, goes up to about 150. And I guess we're going to have to raise that limit given some of the temperatures we're seeing these days. And it does it for each rack. If there's a subcooler, it transfers the load automatically. And it's using RefProp tables and also ACERP refrigeration property tables. So it's the real deal. Honestly, it isn't any different than if you go to Emerson's Copeland compressor site and go in and use their computational tool, except this is set up to save the scenarios, to look at split condenser. Copeland and Honeywell sites don't do that. Look at hot gas defrost. Look at holdback valves. Look at split condenser, almost any feature you can think of. They're not all in this particular model. I took a simpler model so we could see it more easily. So we're coming down here. Is there subcooler or not for that suction group? What's it subcooled by? The design subcooler load. We don't care what it is because we calculate the actual subcooling that's actually required for the current temperatures and pressures. But this is so we can subtract it from the design load if it was included, and it usually is. Drop blade cutout temperature for subcooler, fluid temp out, and continuing down. Now we get into the condensers, minimum condensing set point. This happened to be set up for TD control. These are the condenser TD set points. These set points don't look too healthy. If you're seeing numbers like this, somebody's not setting up the TD properly. It's really pretty hard to set up TD because the TD set point is not the design TD. That's not the set point you want in. If the condenser's been designed for a 17-degree TD, that doesn't mean it's going to operate most efficiently at that TD. The way you figure out what the TD set point is you get somebody like us to run this model over and over again with a TD of 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, right up to 20. And then we look at the annual energy use for each of those. You can plot them out, and there's like a knee. Here's the annual total energy use, and there'll be a minimum. There'll be a minimum for one of those TDs. The TD, as the TD goes too low, the energy use goes up. As the TD goes high, the energy use goes up. When you get to just the right TD, the energy is at a minimum. That's the set point that should go in. Emerson, while I was working there, they've never released it, but they have a floating TD set point strategy that you don't have to do anything except put an initial TD set point in. And then for the actual conditions, how dirty the condenser is, how many fans are out, how crappy the compressors are. And by the way, the compressor efficiency is up here somewhere. It keeps bumping the TD set point until it gets to the minimum energy use of the condensers plus the compressors at that point in time. So we have fan cycling here, no VS, except we have VS on all 3 racks, but 2 of them it's disabled. So we've got VS just showing on 1 rack. This was a real store with all the real warts.
So I have a question about TD. So I typically on low temp racks, you typically have a TD setting, and I'm going just sheer what I see. 8 to 12 on low temp, 12 to upwards of 18 on a regular conventional HFC, HFO condenser. How is that really figured? Like, because a lot of times the condenser itself will be sized for, a 10-degree TD, and it'll give you a BTU value. So like really what dictates that TD end value?
The TD set points that most often go in are the calculated design TD values from the refrigeration legend. That's what typically goes in, or whatever that particular control setup group or new store startup group has typically used. And I think the values you suggested, 8 to 12 low temp, 12 to maybe 16, 17 medium temp, are the values that are typically seen. But let me give you a good example of why this counts. You might have a very expensive 540 RPM fan speed bone condenser, lots and lots of surface, hardly any fan power, really low fan power. And it's rated at, let's say, 600,000 BTUs. Well, it wouldn't be that big. Let's say 300,000 BTUs. You might have the same, we'll talk in years past when some manufacturers make crappy condensers, you might have another 300,000 BTU condenser with half of the surface and 3 times the fan power. Russell used to be famous of doing that. They'd have the same rating as bone, 300,000 BTUs, but they'd be doing it with 30 kW of fan power instead of 8. So now think about this rack with the bone condenser on it. You want to have your operating TD as small as possible so that your condensing temperature is as low as possible, and therefore the rack compressors face as low as discharge pressure as possible and are the most efficient. But you're buying that lower TD and lower saturated condensing temp and lower discharge pressure with fan power. With that bone condenser, it doesn't take a lot of fan power to get a big increase in capacity and a big decrease in compressor discharge pressure and therefore efficiency. On the Russell condenser I was talking about, in order to get the same reduction, it's got to blow a whole bunch more fan power. And therefore, the optimal TD set point for the high fan power, low surface condenser is almost always going to be higher than the TD set point for the high surface, low fan power condenser. So that all gets modeled up in a tool like this. There's other ways to do it. You're not going to kill yourself if you're a degree or two off. I think when we worked out the floating TD control algorithm at Emerson and went out and tested it in Atlanta in an actual field site, we picked up about another 18% over the basic savings from using TD condenser fan control in the first place. And it might have been 20,000 kilowatt hours. But it's sort of for free. You don't have to add any more equipment. You don't have to do anything else. You just control the condenser smarter. So continuing on, unless I haven't satisfied your thirst for TD knowledge.
So Tom, quick question there. So as the ambient temp decreases, are you able to maintain a smaller TD with less fan power or more fan power? How does that scale work?
As the outside temperature drops, the performance of the condenser is relatively consistent. So about the same TD for the same amount of fan power. Is that completely true? No. Guys who work in the field regularly know it's going to be mostly true, but what you'll see is a change in subcooling because those last couple of passes in the condensers, the ones that are filled with liquid, and they're on the entering airstream to the condenser. They're on the bottom. They get the freshest, nicest, coldest air. And the whole idea there is you've got liquid now. The condenser has done its job. Now the liquid's sitting in these passes before it heads down the drop leg. Let's get it as cold as we can. Let's get it as close to ambient temperature as possible. But overall, the condenser performs more or less the same, regardless outside temperature. There are limits at the extremes, but they're not important. So what we do is we plug in a bunch of set points, and this scenario is this store, as found, how we found it, had 80-degree minimum condensing, it had split condenser, it had TD control, and it had a subcooler that was actually working, kind of a rarity. So down here, we had that entered. And if I retrieve the scenario, all those values go into that model. And sadly, the model is quite large, so it takes a little bit of time to run. So we're not going to run them all. I've run them and saved them. And when this baby stops moving, we'll be all set. The next one down, split removed. It shows you went from 974,000 kilowatt hours down to 953,000 kilowatt hours. That's 21,000 kilowatt hours. And all you did was do away with that pesky split. Split isn't there for energy. I think most of the people on this call know it. It's there to conserve charge during the cold winter months and prop up condensing pressures. If you can find a better way to do it than split, that's the thing to do. Split costs you. It takes away surface. Remember, we were talking about more surface, less fan. Less surface, half the condenser gone, you're for sure going to be running the fans that are left at full speed, and all of them are going to be running. So one of the things we often do when we recommission is knock that split set point and the holdbacks pretty much out of the picture, and then wait for any screaming to happen in the winter when we have a minus 18 night float in like we had this past winter. Then we have split restored condensing minimum set, not at 80 degrees, but at 65 for the low temp rack, at 70, and this should say 70 for the medium temp rack. Now we're down from 974 to 914,869. Let's go over here and look at the table here. So these are the results pulled into a spreadsheet so I could look at them more easily. So this store is in Augusta, Maine. This is the as found condition and the annual energy use estimate associated with that. No split does a little better. No split and lower minimum condensing, it does quite a lot better. So 90,000 kilowatt hour total savings for making those changes, as long as you can hold the line. Usually we find this up at 90 degrees minimum condensing, or even more fun, 90 degrees minimum condensing, hot gas defrost with a defrost modulating differential pressure regulator stuck on a 50-pound Delta P, adding another 50 pounds of discharge pressure to the rack at all times, summer, winter, spring, fall. That's when this number gets up to like 170,000 kilowatt hours. Now take the same store. I love to do this. Take the same store and move it to Miami, Florida. And the way we do that is we go over here. We just slide over here. Oop.
Today's episode is sponsored by the RefRush-Shield RDP Series differential pressure monitors from Westermeyer Industries, now available for transcritical CO2 systems in addition to other common pressures and refrigerants. When the filter element of your coalescing oil separator is contaminated, it can hurt your system's performance and efficiency. But how do you know when it's time to replace that filter? Wait too long to replace, and you could end up with a nasty filter blowout. But replacing too often can be a waste of time and money. The answer is installing a differential pressure monitor. The RDP Series differential pressure monitors, including the new transcritical CO2 model, are available now from Westermeyer Industries. To find out more information, email sales@westermeyerin.com. That's WESTERMEYERIN.com.
Mother of God, don't be messing with me. We go over here and we go Florida, Miami, change weather site. And so now it's recomputing the annual energy use based on the weather in sunny Miami. So look what happens here. These are the savings you get from these measures applied in Augusta, Maine. These are the savings you get from these measures applied in Miami, Florida. So you want to know this when you're doing a recommissioning project. I got my butt kicked years ago when I was working for Emerson because I shot off my big mouth about savings that we get for recommissioning everywhere. And then I went down to Miami, Florida and established the set points that we typically use, and the energy use actually went up. So then we had to get in and fix that all up.
Whoops.
We ended up with modest savings. So 0.4% of your starting savings here, 0.4% of your starting annual energy use here, 9.2% here.
So to break that down into a dollar amount, I'm just kind of curious now. So if you're saving X amount of kilowatt hour, what does that equate to as far as monies in that? Is there a place in there where you can actually throw in that number, like how much they pay for kilowatt hour, and find out how much savings they get? Oh, okay.
Yes. So I would say just national average, because you guys have listeners from all over the place. Just use 10 cents. It's an easy number. So 100,000 kilowatt hours is 10 grand. And it happens to be 20 cents up in New England. So that's actually twice as much. And it could be 7 cents in the middle of the country. So 10 cents is a good kind of blended range. So we're looking for 6-digit kilowatt hour change is going to be, you're going to clear, that could be $10, $15, $20,000 worth of savings.
No, in 10 years, nobody's going to have 8-cent power. Nobody's going to have 18-cent power. Everything that's going on out there to get to renewable energy is going to increase the price of electricity. The demand is skyrocketing because the use of combustion fuels will be also forced down. It's just something for us all to get ready for, and it's okay.
I'm gonna blame Elon.
Yeah, that works for me. So here's another model. Same deal.
Tom, real quick, what I think is interesting too is you picked the store up from Augusta and it went from under 1 million to over 1.5 million kilowatt hours annually. Just
moving it to Miami.
Exactly.
Just a couple hundred miles. That's what 400 or 500 miles. That's it.
Well, the interesting ones are maybe Oklahoma City to Houston. That's a big jump in annual kilowatt hours. You get some surprises. Phoenix isn't that bad because it cools off so much at night. Maybe not Phoenix anymore because it's turned into a major city hotspot, but Tucson, cities that are still basically desert cities. So here's a second model where we're running other scenarios. I'll step up there for a moment. This one was to look at subcooling unloaders and other such things. Same store, same bases, same look at what things look like in Miami. And here what we were looking at were different. No subcooling for this store in Augusta, Maine. That's not how it was found. This is the found condition here, 974,000. If it didn't have operating subcooling, the store would have used about 59,000 kilowatt hours more. That's a pretty high value. Normally, north of the Mason-Dixon line, typically you see around 20 to 30,000 kilowatt hours in savings from a subcooler. In Miami, though, if we go down here and take a look at Miami, same store, subcooler saved 117,000 kilowatt hours.
Okay. Tom, I think maybe there's a second screen that's not showing, or we're still looking at Augusta versus Miami. Is that right?
Yeah, it's the same thing on my screen. It's the same document.
Oh, yeah, see tables.
All right, so let me see. I'm going to have to stop sharing and reshare. Is that
Yep.
going to?
Yeah, that's fine.
I was confused for a second. I'm like, what is going on here?
Yeah, and then just reshare it, and I'll put it back up there.
There's a lot of pressure on me.
Oh, stop! You're one of those mean northeasters. So I know you got it. You can put up a little bit of views, right, Tom?
I am kind of a miserable bidder. Let's see.
I don't know. Kevin's pretty miserable too. I don't know. Let's take
For this week, yeah.
Are you seeing it now?
We are still at tables.
All right. Let me go back. Mother of God.
So is it making you share a specific window?
No, I just grabbed the wrong window.
Okay.
It's a little different from what I usually do.
That's right.
It's the same one. Yep. One more try here. Seeing anything?
Nothing yet.
Not yet.
It's not even in the bottom yet. So is it a different window, or is it still the same Excel?
Oh, I know. Let me go in and close out the one that I had open. This is what we want. This is what we don't want. Goodbye. Don't save. And now when I share window, boom, share. There you go.
There we go. That's different.
We cool?
Yeah, I think we're cool now.
All right. So here's the models over here, the scenarios. And by the way, if you want to do a little flash once in a while for a client, we can go over here. Model summary is showing us the savings every month, the reductions in demand. And we've got a couple of other windows here. You can compare scenarios. So you go down here, you pick the scenario you've got as found, and then subcooler always operates, and then hit peak demand and total kilowatt hour use, and up it comes. So let's go back before I embarrass myself here. So let's look at these numbers again. So no subcooling, the store would have been using this much. The store had the subcooler working. So as found was this condition. It was saving 59,000 kilowatt hours, which when you guys couldn't see it, I was talking about as an unusually large value. We typically see up north 20 to 30,000 kilowatt hours. If the subcooling is always on, Brett and I were talking about this before we got started. If instead of turning it off at 55-degree liquid temperature, which is common, sometimes even warmer, there's another 45,000 kilowatt hours to be saved in total if you run the subcooler wide open. Unfortunately, on most racks, something's going to self-destruct. This is an opportunity at a lot of stores, but would require a little capital investment. An electronic expansion valve for the subcooler stages at a minimum, probably a lot more capacity control on whatever suction group is doing the subcooling, but it might be worth it. And when you do scroll compressors in their EVI, you get that automatically. That subcooler is running 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. There's nothing on it. It's wide open. So as long as that compressor is running, it's subcooling. So here's the same thing in Florida. No subcooling with set points. It's not that different from a percentage point of view, but from an absolute value point of view, it's quite a bit more.
Is it because of the humidity down there, or is it because?
No, it's because of the much higher ambient and the fact that your saturated condensing temp is high, even when the condenser's running its little hard out. So your liquid temperature is high. So you do all you can with a subcooler, and that takes quite a lot of power. So it would have cost these are the savings from running that subcooler by using a medium temp rack to displace load from the low temp compressors and the low temperature suction they run at. So it's this number here. You want to compare 59,000 up north, 117,000 at south, down south, same store, same load, everything else the same. So the percentage is a little higher, but because the store, even though it's the same system, is in a warmer climate, it's using a lot more, so you're getting a lot more benefit. So if you're going to Florida to do recommissioning, you can skip doing anything to drop minimum condensing temperatures because it ain't going to happen anyway, and instead spend all your time on subcooling. And when you're monitoring that store to make sure you hang on to those recommissioning savings, spend your time looking at how the subcooler is performing, not worrying about minimum condensing. The weather, the outside ambient is controlling your destiny down there. You're running all the fans anyway. Don't put the set point at 70 degrees or the equivalent pressure equivalent of that. Put it on TD or you get hurt even worse. These values I should have for you, but the model blew up when I put 0 degree subcooling in with the kind of outside temperatures we have in Florida. Mm-hmm. So part of the conversation here is just about modeling tools. And this is our medium level model. We're willing to share this model with just about anybody. There's an installer. We share it with the utilities. If we're willing to share with electric utilities, we should be willing to share it with just about everybody. So if any of you or your audience gets a hankering to give it a shot, we can set them up, give them a little tutorial. It takes a little bit of playing around. We've got like 3 levels of models, and you can send the less complicated models don't let you look at anything other than variable speed condensers, TD control, and a couple other things. The fanciest model we have, which slows your computer down a bit, does the hot gas defrost. It looks at what you're going to save if you stop doing hot gas defrost, or how much more you're going to spend if you start doing it. It looks at defrost differential valves, how much they're killing you if they're set for 55 pounds instead of 25 pounds, or even worse, stuck at 55 pounds. Basically, almost every refrigeration system design element can be modeled there. For all refrigerants, if you want to see how we change refrigerant, this is kind of fun. Let's see, I'm going to make sure this isn't the locked up one. Well, we'll take a chance. This is the one that's a little dicey on me. So I retrieve this scenario. This will take just a second.
And Tom, so while we're waiting, what's interesting to think about is, so subcooling and TD strategy on the condenser, those are very much affected by ambient temperature of the store, but floating suction is much more consistent across regions, correct?
Floating suction is absolute. It's not weather dependent at all. The gain you get is different because the compressor, you're looking at two sides of the compressor always, the discharge side and the suction side. And if the discharge is higher, the same change on the suction side will get you more of a benefit, but you're making the same change.
Do you have anything in the software that because you said you do it off the compressor load, so you don't do it off the compressor model number, correct?
For compressor efficiency?
Yeah, just because I'm curious, because I know that there's some, if you put in X compressor, right, like so a compound cooling compressor, there's certain compressors that you can't go real low as far as floating head, or otherwise the reed valves don't seat well. So I was just wondering if there's like a fail-safe in here telling you that, hey, we want to do floating head, but we can only go this low, because obviously the lower you go, the better, right? Less compression ratio, less kW usage. So, but like I said, there are some compressors out there. They're like, hey, no, you can't go any lower. Like I know for a fact, compound Carlisle compressors, I think it's 70 degrees minimum saturated condensing temperature. Otherwise, those valves start slapping, they don't hold.
Right. They're already in trouble because the entering suction condition is pretty high. So they end up, if you have a low discharge condition, you can easily end up in that regime that they're telling you to stay out of. Heaven help you if you got compound cooling Carlisles. Anyway, I was a 100% Carlisle user when I was at Hannaford, 100%. And I love their compressors, but the compound cooling was a tough addition to the industry. We ran in the couple of brother stores, the one we're looking at now, were compound cooling. I wanted to say a couple of things to answer your question. Here's a compressor, the so-called adiabatic efficiency. If I want to play with unloaders, this is where I play with it. If a compressor has unloaders, the efficiency is reduced. If it has VFD, the efficiency is increased. This number, if you go into the Copeland tables and look at all the commonly used semi-hermetics and EVI scrolls, not the non-EVI scrolls, they'll be lower efficiency than this. The values are almost always the same. The model adjusts the compressor efficiency for the conditions it's seeing for each of those outdoor temperatures and the actual load and the actual suction pressure. So it's doing the basic thermodynamic calculations. If once in a while somebody at a utility busts our stones and they want the actual compressor efficiency for that store in there. And so we pull it out and embed the average adiabatic efficiency in the model and run it on that. It's never more than 2 points away from this. So when you want to model unloaders, the first step of unloading costs you about 8%. 8% and the second step is a deeper step if you happen to have it in that compressor. Taking unloaders away gets you that back. Putting VFDs on to get the compressor capacity at the same level as you had with the unloaders. That gives you a boost of efficiency, not out of this world, at your optimum operating conditions. You're getting about a 1% increase in efficiency. And if you slow down too much, first of all, the compressor oil pump can't keep up anymore and it goes off on oil. A little lower speeds with Carlisle. They've got stronger oil pumps than Copeland. Copeland drops out maybe around 600 hertz, 600 RPM. Maybe Carlisle's if they're in good shape, can get down to 450. But at any rate, you don't want to go down that low anyway, because you started losing efficiency somewhere around 800 RPM because the compressor capacity has gone down. It goes down with every reduction in RPMs, but the losses in the compressor, the windage losses, the losses and electrical losses within the coils, etc., that in fact, stays flat. So the compressor, on an efficiency point of view, gets less and less efficient. Guys, I'm going to turn.
So at that point, from what you're saying and from what the model's showing, running a variable speed compressor over a digital, the variable speed's going to beat it every time.
Yeah, and a digital reciprocating compressor is just a regular reciprocating compressor with a solenoid in a valve unloader mechanism that can handle rapid cycling. You haven't changed the basic principle. You just allowed yourself to be able to do what we might call digital control. Instead of having to go on and off maybe on 1 minute cycles or 3 minute cycles, you can go off on cycles on as low as a second or two. So, but the basic principle is the same. And any kind of unloading, even for scrolls, when I was working for Emerson is when Copeland came out with digital scrolls. And there's a lot of good guys at Copeland. One of them was Kurt Knappe. And we used to get in arguments about the bullshit in their sales literature, where they were arguing that scrolls were digital scrolls were efficiency boost. Well, they're certainly better than conventional unloaders on semi-hermetics, but they weren't as good as speed controlling the compressor. And now you see Copeland is out there with their own speed controls on their own scroll compressors. And that's part of the reason why. Unloading, not so bad for scrolls, but not that great for semi-hermetics. So that's how we reflect it in the model. We bumped the efficiency to reflect the fact that it's got a VFD and that gas capacity control. We heard it for having an unloader. We heard it deeply for having two unloaders. And if you've got an open drive Carlisle with full banks of unloading all over it, we tell you we can't be responsible for our modeling. So anyway, that's how we reflect that. And I thought I'd have them ready for today, but I don't. We can do a second session sometime on this. Split condenser is in our fancier model, being able to put it in and out. This one has it, which is very useful. We have a couple of clients that do a 25, 50, 75% split. We disconnect that whenever we see it and go, come on, get some stones. Let's give all the surface possible to reject this heat to the ambient.
So, Tom, can you remind me what is your conventional wisdom on the split condenser temperature that you reset to as part of the recommissioning up in New England?
Well, we reset it to as low a value as we think won't make the resident service provider hopping mad. Left to our own resources, we make it the last stage of condenser capacity control. So you go first stage fan off, second, third, fourth, all the fans are off. You're still falling. Catch me. Then we split.